Problem number 2 asks us to factor and use the zero product property to find the roots of the following quadratic equations. Problem A is 0 equals x squared minus 7x plus 12. So to factor, we're going to need our diamond and generic rectangle. Before we draw our diamond and generic rectangle, we want to make sure that it's in the proper order. So ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And we take a look at problem A, and it is in fact in the correct order, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So we can draw our diamond and generic rectangle. We put the ax squared term in one corner, so I've got x squared. In the opposite corner, I put the c term, in this case it's 12. I multiply the two of those together to get 12x squared, and I put that at the top of my diamond. At the bottom of my diamond, I put the bx term, which is negative 7x. So at this point, I have to figure out what two factors multiply to a positive 12x squared and add to a negative 7x. If I don't know, I can start going through my factors of 12. I know that they add to a negative number, and since they multiply to a positive number, I know that both of them have to be negative. So I could go negative 1 times negative 12, which doesn't work. Negative 2 times negative 6 doesn't work for my sum. Negative 3 times negative 4. That does work. So I have negative 3x and a negative 4x. Those multiply to 12x squared and add to a negative 7x. So if I plug in my negative 3x and my negative 4x, now I have to pull out my common factors. So negative 3x and positive 12 have 3 in common. X squared and negative 4x have x in common. X squared and negative 3x have x in common. Negative 4x and positive 12 have 4 in common. Now I have to check each box. X times x is x squared. 3 times x is not negative 3x. So I need to make the 3 negative. We always make the other number negative before making the variable negative. So now this column works. Let's try over here. X times 4 is not negative 4x, so we need to make this negative. So now we check. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. Therefore, we have found our factors. So we now have x minus 3 times the quantity x minus 4 equals 0. So this is the factored version of the quadratic equation that we began with. Now we have to use the zero product property to find the roots. So we're going to do x minus 3 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. The zero product property is very simple. It just states that anything times 0 is 0. Therefore, if x minus 3 is 0, when multiplied by the other parentheses, we get 0. The same goes for if x minus 4 is equal to 0. If we multiply it by the other parentheses, we're going to get 0, since anything times 0 is 0. So I'm going to add 3 to each side to solve this equation. And when I solve this equation, I'm going to get x equals a positive 3. So we have an x-intercept at x equals 3. I'm going to add 4 to each side of this equation. So I have an x-intercept at x equals positive 4. Okay, we need to check the next equation. There is a small typo in the next equation, so we need to fix that. It is a minus 23x. Okay, so is it in the correct order? Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It is in the correct order once we fixed the typo. So now we need our diamond and generic rectangle. So the first thing we do is check and see if they have any common factors. Do 6, 23, and 20 have any common factors? They don't, since 23 or negative 23 is a prime number. It doesn't have any factors that are going to help us. So we're going to have to use the numbers that are given here. So we're going to put our 6x squared in the corner. Opposite corner has 20. So then if you need to use a calculator, you can use a calculator here. You get 6 times 20, which gives you 120 x squared. And they have to add to a negative 23x. So since they multiply to a positive number and add to a negative number, we know that both numbers have to be negative. That's the only way it would work. So if we don't know what is going to work here, we can just start listing the factors. So if we take 120x squared, we know that 120x squared would be negative 1x times a negative 120x. Okay, that doesn't give us the sum that we need, so we could do negative 2x times a negative 60x. Still not the sum that we need, so negative 3x times negative 40x, we're at negative 43x, so we're getting closer, but we're not there yet. So negative 4x times a negative 30x, well, we're at negative 34x, so we're getting a lot closer here, but we're still not to the answer that we want. Okay, at negative 5x times a negative 24x. And you can just, how do you find these factors? I'm literally just taking a calculator and doing 120 divided by negative 1, 120 divided by negative 2, 120 divided by negative 3, so forth and so on. So now we can do negative 6x times negative 20x. Well, we're really close. That's at negative 26x, but not quite what we need. Okay, so 120 is not divisible by 7. It's not a whole number. So we're going to do 120 divided by 8. That's 15. So negative 8x, so negative 15x. And we can see that they multiply to 120x squared, and they do in fact add to a negative 23x. So our factors here that we need are negative 8x and a negative 15x. So now we are going to pull out our common factors. So negative 15x and 20 have 5 in common. 6x squared and negative 8x have 2x in common. 6x squared and negative 15x have 3x in common. Negative 8x and 20, well, They're both even numbers, so we know they have 2 in common, but they actually have more than just 2 in common. The biggest common factor, the largest common factor, is 4. So now we check. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. 5 times 3x is not negative 15x, so we're going to make this negative. So this column works now. 4 times 2x is not a negative 8x, so we've got to make this negative. And so we recheck all of our boxes. 2x times 3x is 6x squared. Negative 5 times 3x is negative 15x. 2x times negative 4 is negative 8x. And negative 5 times negative 4 is a positive 20. So we now have the correct factors. So we're going to write it out as 2x minus 5 times the quantity 3x minus 4 equals 0. So this is the equation as a product. Now we have to solve these. So we've got 2x minus 5 equals 0. I'm going to add 5 to each side of my equation. So I have 2x equals 5. Divide both sides by 2. So x equals 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. So we got x is equal to 2.5. Then we've got 3x minus 4 equals 0. So I need to add 4 to each side of this equation. I have 3x equals 4. I divide both sides by 3. When we divide by 3, we don't get a whole number as our answer. So we're just going to leave it as x equals 4/3. So we get x equals 2.5 and x equals 4/3.